maybe I'll try to chop this up. Normally I've done lives with like the pop the balloon stuff, but I want to do more lives where we're actually discussing some of the more serious matters that the Flights and Feelings channel, formerly known as The Shores, formerly known as Flights and Feelings. It went from Flights and Feelings to The Shores, back to the Flights and Feelings. A bunch of formalities in there. And something I've been discussing on this channel in terms of faith is the irrationality of it. And I want to keep exploring what that means. And I've seen several different perspectives that keep kind of letting me know that I'm on the right path with this. And so I wanted to bring up this video that I just saw from Jordan Peterson that I thought was quite interesting as well. Maybe we'll check out another video that a friend of mine, Ruslan, sent to me as well later in it. We'll try to keep this stream to about an hour rather than a long running one. But one of my favorite directors is Christopher Nolan. One of my favorite movies by Christopher Nolan is The Prestige, which is a sleeper. You've got to watch The Prestige. A lot of people haven't seen it. It is a sleeper. Go check that mug out. But outside of The Prestige, one of my favorite movies by Christopher Nolan, and one of my favorite movies in general, is Interstellar. And one of my favorite scenes of one of my favorite movies of my favorite director is this part where Murph, the adult version of Murph, is looking at this equation that they've been running for years. I forget the other character's name now, but they've been running this equation for years, trying to figure out the main problem to the movie. I won't get too much into it, but she says something to this effect. She's looking at the equation that's on the board, and they've been running these different formulas forever. And then she notices that, man, there's an underlying assumption happening here that's wrong. I pull up the quote here. She says, 3 years, we've been trying to solve the equation without changing the underlying assumption about time. And making each iteration is an attempt to prove its own proof. It's recursive. It's nonsensical. Professor Brand, that's his name, you have been trying to finish it with one arm or no both. He says, you've been trying to finish it with one arm. No, both arms behind your back. Essentially what they're saying is, we've been trying to solve this massive problem, but in order to solve problems, you must have the right question first. And our questions can be super packed with a bunch of presuppositions, or to the point that we're asking the completely wrong question. And I think that correlates to the conversation about faith, in that when we're discussing God, and we're trying to have rational arguments for God, such as who created God and how do we get there? And the point may be that we are either, one, asking the wrong questions, or we are looking in the wrong places for the answer to that. So for instance, when it comes to the supernatural, oftentimes Christians and non-Christians alike will point to science to try to answer supernatural questions. Christians will say, well, science has a bias against supernaturalism. And so therefore they will never come to the conclusions that supernatural people come to, or people who believe in the supernatural come to. The problem with that is, by definition, natural sciences can't explain anything that happens in the supernatural realm. It's not a bias. It just means that it is unequipped to answer the things that are supernatural. If supernatural events could be explained by the natural sciences, then those supernatural events would no longer be called supernatural. They would now be included within the natural sciences. We see this with illnesses such as epilepsy that used to be considered supernatural, and now they're enveloped in the natural sciences. So epilepsy used to be you're possessed by a demonic spirit or whatever. Now it's like, oh, we know this neurological event that's happening within the brain, and we know how to address it, and we know how to describe it in natural terms. It's no longer a natural thing. So my point being that either we can be asking wrong questions, or we can be looking in the wrong places for those answers. And so just put my cards on the table. For those of you who may know, I'm not a Christian. I am very much a skeptic who is open to supernaturalism, open to the idea of miracles, open to the concept of God. And I've come to this conclusion that I'm not confident about a lot of things. I really, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. So I'm not confident about a lot of things. But one thing I am confident about is that if there is a God, if there is the supernatural realm, you will not get there through reasoning or rationalism. That it very well may be that God is not something that you rationalize or even believe in, but rather experience. And when you experience something, the need to believe in it almost becomes, at best, redundant, or more practically, and probably at worst, it becomes unnecessary to say I believe in something. I'm just musing right now, but let me get to the main point here. I want to pull up this video from Jordan Peterson that was on, I think, something about Aquinas. I forget let's pull it up here.
And this has nothing to do with belief.
Hold on.
Not the way that, is God a table? It's like, no, there, fine.
Yeah.
We'll deal with the materialist.
Yeah.
God does not have the same being as a table.
He's not another piece of furniture in our ontology.
Well, and no one ever said he was.
Right.
There's not a claim like, in fact,
just the new atheists, I think.
The claim in the Old Testament constantly is that whatever God is ineffable and beyond being and becoming. Beyond.
Yeah.
Right? And Moses himself, he gets a glimpse of God in the burning bush, and he gets another glimpse. All he sees is God's back between, a narrow portal through two rocks, because that's all he can stand.
Yeah.
No one ever said God was a table. That's not the claim in the biblical corpus, not in the least. In fact, the claim is constantly God is not a part of the natural order. Right? He's not Baal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I am who am.
Yeah, and I am who I am. I am who I was. I am who I will be. That's all in that phrase. It's the spirit that underlies being and becoming itself. It's the process that gives rise to being itself. And it's identical, as far as I can tell, with consciousness. It's the same thing, because that's what we do with our consciousness. We contend with possibility. We're not automatons driven by materialistic determinism. That's not what we're like. It's not even possible technically. You can't compute your way forward into an uncertain future. You can't use an algorithm to do that. Determinism doesn't work. It's the process that gives rise to, right? He's not Baal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I am who am.
Yeah, and I am who I am. I am who I was. I am who I will be. That's all in that phrase. It's the spirit that underlies being and becoming itself. It's the process that gives rise to being itself. And it's identical, as far as I can tell, with consciousness. It's the same thing, because that's what we do with our consciousness.
Okay, I'm not going to pretend like I've listened to it twice. I'm not going to pretend like I understand his correlation to consciousness. Somebody leave it in the comment section.
Consciousness. We contend with possibility. We're not automatons driven by materialistic determinism. That's not what we're like. It's not even possible technically. You can't compute your way forward into an uncertain future. You can't use an algorithm to do that. Determinism doesn't work. That's not a theory.
Yeah, okay.
We know that.
So if you're saying, if somebody's out there and like, I would like to believe.
To be fair, we're like airdropping into this conversation in the middle of somewhere. I haven't even watched the full interview, so I don't know I'm trying to figure out where this conversation is starting, but there are some good points in here that I want to get to that I think I understand what he's saying.
Believe in God if it's real. Let's say they
Yeah,
just say
but
that.
you wouldn't. That's the thing.
No, I don't know. I meet people who say if God exists, I want to know that. I'm not.
The price is the cross.
My point is, would you say to them, it's not about looking at philosophical arguments. It's about taking up your cross and following Him. That's the quicker
That's what it
path
is.
to accepting belief in God than a philosophical
exactly.
syllogism.
No, it's a mode of being.
Yeah.
It's a mode of being. It's not a set of beliefs. We were completely wrong about this. You asked earlier why so many people in the intellectual realm are converting. It's because they've understood that. Ayaan Hirsi Ali said this explicitly. We got the question wrong. Does God exist? It's like, well, what? That's not the right question. The right question is, are you going to take your cross and struggle uphill? Because either way, it's faith. Either way.
I've been saying this. Either way, it is faith. Or as I would like to sort of insert my own, I'll go ahead and add that in. I'll try to insert my own definition to his word of faith. There's a bit of absurdity to faith, but there's absurdity to all, like, taken to its furthest conclusion, you will always end up somewhere that the rational mind cannot compute, that cannot connect the dots. And whether that's in faith or whether that's in a materialist world, you will at least act. So if you believe in a completely materialist world, and this is someone who's a skeptic, and I admit my I admit the delusion there, in a sense, that if you adhere completely to a materialist world and you live as though there is meaning to life, which we somewhat can't avoid, you live as though there is objective morality and you cannot avoid that. That's an objection that a lot of Christians will make to me. Like, well, where do you get morality from? We don't get objective morality from a materialist world. And I actually agree. I don't believe that morality is objective. I believe that it's intersubjective, which is another conversation for another video. But I also don't believe that you get objective morality from the Christian or religious perspective. You don't get it. You still get a type of intersubjective where the time, the place, and the people matter to what should actually be done. There's no real such thing as objective morality. There's a sense of objective authority from the Creator to some degree, but there's no objective morality even for the Christian in a very literal sense. However, I don't see that as a problem. So I also don't see it as a way or a reason to make an apologetic response to it. I do not see subjective morality ultimately as an issue. Is it uncomfortable? Yes. But I've also come to the space where I don't believe that you need to try to solve every uncomfortable thing. There's going to be uncomfortable truths, whether you believe in God or you don't. There's going to be some things that you're simply uncomfortable with. And I think that morality being subjective or intersubjective is an uncomfortable truth. But still, back to the point, you still have to live by some sort of delusion or absurdity that rationality can't get you to in order to live a life that is meaningful and coherent and so forth. And so I get with Peterson on that of like, it's all faith.
It's like, no. Okay. Well, then what? It's all about you. It's all about your whims. Like, what's it about then? What spirit is going to possess you if it's not that spirit?
I'm repeating myself, and I apologize, but it seems to me that God could not exist, and it could still be the case that I can carry my cross uphill and that be beneficial to me.
There's the usefulness issue that it could be that, if I just do this, then it'll still be beneficial to me. I'm not concerned with that, though. I'm not concerned with it simply being, Joe, try to use your words right in a way that makes sense. But I'm not necessarily concerned with whether or not faith is useful to a particular external outcome that I desire in my life, whether it be family, money, status, identity, functionality in the world. I'm not so much concerned with that. I am concerned with the usefulness of what it does for my experience and what I sense about myself and my own meaningfulness. Now, of course, that could turn into beneficial outcomes, but I'm not so much concerned with how faith, you can make the argument that, well, Christianity has done so many good things for religion, or religion in general is great for people. This is how we get morality, blah, 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 blah. Usefulness is not the same as truthfulness. But I think Peterson may object to this. I think that that what Peterson may be trying to get at, and maybe this guy here, Pints with Aquinas, the host here, might be trying to get at as well, the taking up your cross, or in the sense of faith. And I had a commenter on one of my videos point this out to me, and I'm glad he did. We disagreed on some things, but I do agree with him that faith, particularly in the Bible, is not simply mental ascension to claims that you cannot prove. That is one of the definitions. That might even be the broader definition. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence not seen. That is part of the definition of faith, to believe without evidence. But another part of faith is also the act, the participation in it, the act of doing something, not just mental ascension. And I think there is where I'm most concerned with faith, the experience, the subjective, existential perspective of faith, where this odd thing happens where if you just start doing it, then you can start believing. It's kind of like my coach in high school. Granted, he was a bad coach, so this may not be a great example, but just imagine that he was a good coach, because I think this still works with any coaching system. He would always say, he brought in a new system from our old coach that we had, and he says, y'all got to buy into the system. It won't work unless you buy into the system. It will not work unless you buy into the system. Meaning that whatever plays he wanted to run, whatever philosophy of basketball that he wanted to run, it simply was not going to work unless we believed that it would work. It was sort of this self-fulfilling prophecy type thing. And then rather than sitting around thinking in our minds about whether or not this would work, running our own arguments against why this system would work, whatever type of plays that he wants to run, it will work if we actually believe it works. And our effort into it is what makes it work. Now, granted, if I use this analogy for religion, you could say that, well, that's the case for all religious belief. And I'm not here trying to make a case for any specific type of religious belief. I'm just saying that there is something that I'm interested in considering of what does it look like to simply begin participating as if faith is already there, and that in and of itself is faith. And I think that's what Kierkegaard gets at. The term leap of faith is attributed to Kierkegaard. He actually probably wouldn't word it that way. It was more so leap to faith. But there is still, he does use the language of leaping. There is a sense of Soren Kierkegaard, somebody that I've been speaking about frequently on this channel. There is a sense that you do have to make what he calls the infinite leap, where you can't simply reason yourself to it. You just have to start doing it as if it's true. And in doing it as if it's true is what allows you to realize that it is true, versus sitting and pontificate in the rational realm about whether or not it's true. So, I'm going to get to these comments in just a second. Let me try to push this video. So why not just accept
that? Well, why not be open to that?
Because the concept of God is something like the spirit of, what would you say, hierarchical harmony. It's something like that. This is a definition. So look, beneficial for you. No. No,
By beneficial, I don't mean in a cheap, quick sense. I mean, I will flourish if I do this thing.
But here's the offer God makes Abraham. Okay, so here's what the story signifies. Really, this is how the story lays itself out. So Abraham is a late bloomer, right? He's privileged. He's an overgrown infant. He lives in his father's tent. He's never gone anywhere. Peeled grapes appear for him magically, He's got everything. He's got the socialist utopia happening. And a voice comes to him and says,
I have never thought about the story of Abraham in that way. Like, oh yeah, he was. I mean, it's story, but still, like, yeah, in that sense, like, oh yeah, he was kind of chilling. He was grown and was away from any type of real struggle, and then was thrown into the struggle.
Get the hell away from your zone of comfort. Get out in the world. Have your adventure. Get away from your father. Get away from your tribe. Get away from your people. Get out in the world. And Abraham says, okay. And he consecrates his adventure to God. Okay, God makes him an offer. It's a deal. Here's the deal. Now you can think about this biologically. Okay, so imagine a child. A child is motivated to mature, motivated to explore the world. Why? Because the world calls to him and beckons. And the parent helps instantiate and develop conscience. And so the child is pulled out into the world, regulated by conscience, and called forward by the manifestation.
Let me just say this too. I saw this comment as well. Somebody says, most people watch Jordan Peterson and become religious, but if you listen carefully, Peterson doesn't actually believe in God, colloquially speaking. This is one gripe that I've sort of had with Peterson for a while, is that he has played the fence, but that's also, if I'm being fair, someone could make the same sort of objection to me, especially considering my recent content of sort of playing the fence and doing exactly what I'm saying not to do, which is pontificating, continue to pontificate and rationalize about God, but not actually believing in God. I think that could be, from what I can tell from Peterson, I haven't consumed a lot of his stuff intentionally. It's come across my feed quite a bit. I don't think you can avoid Jordan Peterson these days, but he's there. But so I may not be able to give him a fair shake because I don't listen to enough of his stuff to say something that I think will be fair to his character or what he actually believes. But just from what I gather from the little bit that I watch, it does kind of feel like he's able to benefit from speaking to very religious or even very conservative spaces, while also, if you really listen to him, not really being able to draw any concrete conclusions on what he actually believes. That's just my take from very limited interaction with him, but let's go.
I mean, that is a representation of the spirit that impels him towards development. Same thing in adulthood. Abraham decides he's going to live by the calling of that spirit. That's his decision. Okay, so what's the offer? Follow the pathway of adventure. You'll be a blessing to yourself. That's a good deal. Mm-hmm. Are you a blessing to yourself? No, I'm addicted to pornography. It's like, time for a better adventure there, young man.
Yeah.
Right. You'll be a blessing to yourself. You'll earn a well-deserved reputation. That's a good deal. Yep. That's a good deal. That's the place you store the treasure that you store up in heaven. Right? That's in the reputation that you have for ethical action with others. There's no better place to store your treasure than that. Right? That's the basis of communal existence. Your reputation will grow deservedly. You'll establish something permanent. In Abraham's case, it's a long-lasting dynasty, right? He'll be the father of nations. Why? Because he treads the appropriate path of the pattern of fatherhood that best ensures the flourishing of multiple generations. And he does that by abiding by the pathway of adventure. They're the same thing. And we would think, well,
he is sounding a lot like Joseph Campbell right now. If you're familiar with Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth, very influenced by Carl Jung. I believe Peterson is also strongly influenced by Carl Jung as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some overlap in that. But yeah, this idea of being called to the adventure, the hero's journey. And that's where you'll find your meaning. It's not simply trying to pontificate about your meaning. You won't find your meaning by thinking about meaning. You find your meaning by stepping out into the adventure, and you find it along the way within the action of seeking out the adventure of life. And that sounds a lot like Campbell here.
If a child fully followed the instinct that guides him to maturation, would he not become the best of all possible fathers? And would that not be the proper pathway for establishing a dynastic legacy? As a mentor and as an actual father? Mm-hmm. Right, that's not the selfish gene.
No,
really, it's seriously not. You'll do it in a way that'll be a blessing to everyone else. Okay, so 4 things, all stacked on top of each other. Adventure, okay, true adventure. You'll be a blessing to yourself. Your reputation will grow, and rightfully so. You'll establish something permanent and long-lasting that echoes down the generations, and it'll be good for everyone. Okay, there's a harmony about all that, right? There's a stacked harmony. Okay.
Yeah, I'm still listening to him. It does feel like I would appreciate it more. What he's saying right now sounds really great and makes some strong points. It, to me, would hit harder if I actually knew what he believed. And what about this that he's suggesting, is he actually doing himself as a sort of, and maybe he is in some way. I'm not saying he's not. I don't know.
Okay, the spirit of that harmony, that's God. It's a definition.
Okay.
It's a definition, you see.
Yeah,
Now, it's not the only definition.
I have to think more about that, because when I think of well, it's interesting. Thomas Aquinas is, of course, famous for saying, of course, you can't know what God is. To know what something is, you have to define it, and to define something is to definite it, right?
That isn't, so the Bible doesn't do that.
Definite it. I never thought of define that way. To define something is to definite it. Is that right, though? To define something is to make it unfinite. But then that would mean that we're making God infinite. God is unfinite. Maybe I don't get I saw where he was going, and then he lost me with that little quip. I don't know.
It characterizes it.
Right.
Right.
But I guess
it's different.
But if I was to give something of a definition, like, it's kind of like when people say, well, who created God? That kind of question. To me, it's like, well, by God, I mean a metaphysically necessary being whose non-existence is impossible. So asking who created God is like saying, if your brother is a bachelor, what's his wife's name? It misunderstands what we mean by God. So I need to think more about what you just...
You run that back.
Necessary being whose non-existence is impossible. So asking who created God is like saying, if your brother is a bachelor, what's his wife's name? It misunderstands what we mean by...
Asking who created God is like asking your brother, what?
Being whose non-existence is impossible. So asking who created God is like saying, if your brother is a bachelor, what's his wife's name?
If your brother is a bachelor, what's his wife's name? I get with the I can get with that proposal that just think it. Let me process this. I'm processing this in real time with y'all. Does that kick the can down the road? Does it not solve the issue? Like, I get the issue with even asking the question of whether or not, who created God? Well, that question is nonsensical, because the very thing that we're saying about God is that he is uncreated. So you can't ask the question. It's a nonsensical that the categories don't line up. I can get with that. I don't think that the question of, whether or not, I don't think that hangs me up as an agnostic skeptic, wondering about whether or not God was created or who created God. That's never really bothered me, because you have to at some point start with an uncreated something, or at least not created in the traditional sense that we in our own finite rational minds can understand the word created. So you have to go back somewhere. I don't think you really have I think when we start discussing the nature of that God, that's where it gets quirky, and whether or not that God is personal, whether that God can be and what do we mean? And what do you mean by that? What do you mean by God? Does that mean the one who created this existence? Somebody asked me, could I prove that we don't live in a simulation? I was like, no, I cannot prove that we don't live in a simulation. It's an unfalsifiable claim. And unfortunately, I think theists oftentimes make very unfalsifiable claims. You can't say that it's wrong, or you can't prove that it's wrong, can't prove that it's right. Anything that you would say to prove it wrong could just be digested by the proposal itself. So anything you say, like, well, I know it's not a simulation because X, Y, Z, and we could simply respond, well, that's what the simulation would want you to think. And then there's no way out of that conversation. And maybe that's the way with God as well. And so I think I'm sounding a lot like Peterson now. Wow, that's why I can't really judge him too much. It's like, well, what do you mean by God? Peterson is known for, like, when you ask him a really simple question, he's like, do you believe in God? What do you mean by do? what do you mean when you say believe? What do you mean when you say God? Which is true, though. There's so many ideas that come to mind that we assume about the definition of when we say the word God, that can be very limited to a lot of things. So anyways.
It misunderstands what we mean by God. So I need to think more about what you just said.
Well, okay, so the way the biblical corpus deals with that is it doesn't define God, it characterizes God.
What's the difference? What does it mean to characterize?
You use a narrative to characterize.
Okay.
And so God is shown like he's a complex object, let's say, and multidimensionally complex. That's the way of thinking about it. Very complex character. And so there's multiple snapshots of his character. Each story is a snapshot of his character. And the insistence, the monotheistic insistence, is that all of those characterizations speak of a unity. Okay, so I can walk you through some of the characterizations. So in the opening chapters of Genesis, God is the spirit that broods on the waters, the primordial waters of potential. Tohu vabohu, teom. It's not water. No, there's no water created yet. It's potential. It's the Leviathan. That's the other thing. It's the monster you cut into pieces to make the world. It's the giant you defeat to.
I will say this.
He's a complex object, let's say, and equal corpus deals with that is it doesn't define God, it characterizes God.
What's his wife's name? It misunderstands what we mean by God. So I need to think more about what you just said.
Well, okay, so the way the biblical corpus deals with that is it doesn't define God, it characterizes God.
What's the difference?
The Bible doesn't define God, it characterizes God. I don't know if that's absolutely true throughout the Bible. I have to think about that for a little while, but I do think there's some merit to that. There's something I was thinking about recently. You know, something I've been considering. I just started reading through the Gospel of Thomas. I'm a little ashamed that I've never even thought to give it a chance. Even after leaving Christianity, you just assume that when they're called the quote unquote Gnostic Gospels, that there's not really much worth to them in the conversation about what early Christians believed about Jesus. And you're just kind of written off as this sort of heretical minority. But I think there's there could be a lot of spiritual value to the Gospel of Thomas. And one thing that I was considering as I'm going through this Gospel of Thomas and considering what it has in common with the other four Gospels, and a theme that is quite common in the Gospels is that I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, I can't recall right now. I haven't really dove into the Bible in very deep research in a long time, just cursory reading at this point. So I can't recall many, if any at all, places in the Bible where the kingdom, in the Gospels, where the kingdom of God is defined. When Jesus speaks about the kingdom, does he say the kingdom of God is this? Or does he say the kingdom of God is like? The kingdom of God is like XYZ. The kingdom of God is like this. The kingdom of God is like that. Meaning, the kingdom of God cannot be defined. Ultimate reality cannot be defined, but we can, at least for our own finite minds, try to say some things that may translate to our experience. And even when the Bible says that that God is such and such, even when it doesn't use the word like, or it's a sort of simile, it could still be possible that it's still only making comparisons or characterizations, as Peterson says here. It could be that the Bible, when the Bible says the name of the Lord is a strong tower, well, the name of the Lord and the Lord himself is not a strong tower. He's not a literal strong tower. But it's to say something about what we experience with strong towers in the time of war and conflict and struggle. You run into it with a sense of urgency, is this place of protection. That's the point it's trying to make, is that so even in saying the name of the Lord is, which sounds like a definition, really is just a characterization. And maybe from the human experience, we can only make characterizations about the nature of God. We can never fully define, which that idea would then have to go back to what our main conversation about this is, would have to presuppose that, one, you can't rationalize God or the supernatural or ultimate reality at the end of the day. You can rationalize some things, but ultimately you cannot rationalize. And you have to approach it with the presupposition that it does exist. And you act as if it exists, and through acting as if it exists, you find that it exists. And then you find characterizations about it. So you just join into the narrative, as he's saying, like, well, God is told through narratives. He's not so much defined as it is, here's a character, and here's how we can see God's character played out in these different scenarios. And this is what I'm open to as far as someone who's an agnostic skeptic, who's open to supernatural experience, and even open to considering the Judeo-Christian tradition as a way of guiding that. Meaning that I'm open to how followers of Yahweh, followers of Jesus, have characterized the nature of this God in the way that this God interacts in human time. And those characterizations don't always have to be historically accurate or true, but they will always be true in some sense. The Bible will always be true in this sense. This is one thing I can say, is that it is true about either one, what a group of people experienced that God to be like in their time and how they understood God, or two, how they desired that God to be. That is true. How they perceived God or how they desired to perceive God. And that's, as Jordan Peterson would say, that's not nothing. That is interesting and could be used as a guiding light. So
what does it mean to characterize?
You use a narrative to characterize.
Okay.
And so God is shown like he's a complex object, let's say, and multidimensionally complex. That's the way of thinking about it. Very complex character. And so there's multiple snapshots of his character. Each story is a snapshot of his character. And the insistence, the monotheistic insistence, is that all of those characterizations speak of a unity. Okay, so I can walk you through some of the characterizations. So in the opening chapters of Genesis, God is the spirit that broods on the waters, the primordial waters of potential. Tohu vabohu, teom. It's not water. No, there's no water created yet. It's potential. It's the Leviathan. That's the other thing. World of possibility in front of you. And you navigate through it with a vision. That's how you live. That's what your consciousness is. That's why it's made in the image of God. And you have something to do. It's not trivial. You're shaping the world. You're co-creating the world. And hopefully as an emissary of God. God is the establisher of the moral order. He's the spirit that forbids human beings for taking on the right to define the moral order to themselves. That's eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's like, no, you can do anything you want, but you do not get to define the moral order. This is why Nietzsche was wrong.
Do you mind putting the microphone up to your mouth? Is that what you're saying? You're fine.
No, yeah.
Yeah, keep going. Nietzsche.
Yeah, well, Nietzsche said, God's dead. We'll have to create our own values. Well, that's what Lucifer offered Eve. You'll become as gods, knowing good and evil. It's like, no, you do not get to define the moral order. Why? Because it's real. It's real. You get to ally yourself with the moral order. You get to arrange yourself in accordance with the moral order. If you usurp it, you do that as a consequence of Luciferian temptation. Truly. That's what precipitates the fall of man.
I got a quote.
Bringing up morality. I will say this, though. There, and as ancient religious people perceived, there does seem to be, no matter what spiritual lens you look at this through, or non-spiritual lens, there does tend to be a way that life goes, a way that human existence and human interaction goes. And as much as you would like to redefine what that looks like, it may not always be possible, at least not for long. It will still sort of blow up in your face. And what's an example I can give? I think marriage might be a good example. When we talk about, I think some of the objections that conservative people may give to gay marriage, for instance, and which I'm not against. I've never been political. Even as a Christian, I was never politically against gay marriage. As a Christian, I did believe that there was some sort of inherent sin to homosexuality, to being queer. If it bears stating, I obviously don't believe that anymore. But in any case, one of the pushbacks that people have for that is that, well, what's next? What's going to be on the horizon? Is polygamy going to be on the horizon if we are allowed to redefine what marriage is? And my thought is this. I think human experience will push back against that. Queer or not, it seems to be for our species that sexual jealousy and the desire for monogamy at large will be around for a long time. And I think it is an interesting point to make that I remember Keller making about the Bible, how we see so much polygamy in the Old Testament. And you could make strong arguments that God not only permitted it, but by his permission of it happening, he ordained it as well. So there's that. You can make that argument, I think. But whether or not that is true, the case being that in the Bible, anytime you saw someone like Abraham and Sarah with his mistress, or David or Solomon, anytime there were multiple wives involved, it was never peace. There was always some sort of strife that came directly from polygamy. And so I think that might still be true today, that what I'm trying to get at is that there may be some sort of order that that life tends to go. And I don't think that means that. I think when conservatives hear that, it means like a calling back to something, some sort of traditional values that came out of particular religious views or particular cultural views. But I do think there's a reason why monogamy became the more popular thing. Of course, with monogamy, a lot of patriarchy came as well. And so I'm not arguing for that to continue to be the norm in some sense. But yeah, there tends to be a way that life goes. Gay X-Trad speaks, if gay marriage leads to polygamy, then Christianity leads to theocracy. Let me read the rest of this comment. Many religious folks fail to see how a slippery slope can be applied right back at them. Yeah, that's the tricky part. When I hear about how Christians interact politically, I'm like, y'all sound like y'all want a theocracy. Like having a country that was loosely founded on a particular view of Christian values is not the same as having a Christian nation. And there's a lot of Christians who seem to be intentionally or unintentionally arguing for that. All right.
But my friend John Henry Spann, he said this morning. He was talking to this individual who chose to sleep around. And he said, listen, what did you say? He said, you say it. It was really good. You can act as if...
God forgives us. Nature does not.
Yeah, God will forgive you. Nature will not.
Yeah, God will forgive you. Nature does not. That's a great. I should have kept playing it. That's actually another great example as well. It's not just even polygamy, but even what's the word I'm looking for? Promiscuity. Like that's the thing that, and this is coming from someone who believes in intersubjective, that morality is not objective. But nature is, though. And you, in many ways, bump up against nature. For instance, you can be someone who can sleep around with whoever you want to sleep around with. But depending on the goals that the things that you want to get out of life, in the long run, it may not be something that serves you best. And nature won't forgive you for that. The effects that it has on your ability to... another great example of that is pornography. nature tends to go, nature does not forgive. So for instance, I'm sounding a lot like a Christian right now, but Paul says something like, what does he say? All things are permissible. He was quoting, I think he was quoting a non-Christian poet or thinker or something like that. All things are permissible. And then he answers it, but not all things are beneficial. And so that's something I've had to learn outside of Christian faith as well, is that, oh yeah, you can literally do anything you want now, but that's not to say that it won't come with consequences. You can have guilt-free sex. You can watch pornography guilt-free, but it's clearly known. I thought it was really interesting. I remember as a Christian, I made a video about why porn was bad and why we shouldn't indulge in it. And I had it kind of hit the algorithm outside of Christian spaces, and I had a lot of non-Christians saying pornography is not bad. Why are you saying it's bad? That was like 10 years ago. It's interesting how the landscape has changed 10 years later, where there are whole movements outside of the church that are like, yo, porn is bad. Porn is really destroying our minds. Porn is just not good. This is not the same as shading sex workers. This is simply to say that, yo, the way that our brains are wired and the way that we use porn to calm our minds and to try to deal with issues, it's not good. It's just not good. And that's not to say that's not making a moral statement. That's not saying that, you're a sinner, you'll go to hell if you watch porn. It's just, it is bad. It will not be good for you. So yeah.
Yes,
so you start engaging in these behaviors, and you get the shit kicked out of you, and God will forgive you, but you still have to deal with the fact that you just had the shit kicked out of you.
Yeah, well, that's the tale of the flood and the tale of Sodom and Gomorrah. It's like muck about. So you think, well, what sort of God is that? It's like the God who took the Soviet Union apart. How about that?
Also, a massive thanks to Hallow for sponsoring.
Okay, cool. All right, that's enough of that. Let's throw some of these up here. I'll just say this, though. Where he stood on all of this in his own life. But yeah, let me see something real quick. Perfect. Let's actually drag this down just a little bit. It was a little too high. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm trying to make this thing a little more dynamic. We're working this, yeah. Let's get the chat up here, right on the screen here. Okay, cool. Let's answer some stuff. Got it. Okay. Somebody said, how is morality not objective? That's not really the point that I'm trying to belabor on in this video today. I'll make a video about that. I don't believe that morality is objective, at least for the human experience. Even for the Christian, you don't have access to objective morality. You still have to make subjective decisions about what objective morality is and if it's good. You don't have access to. You only have claims to it in a theoretical sense, but not in a practical sense. Every Christian has to live out their life in a very existential, subjective way, making decisions. Even if you say they're influenced by the Holy Spirit, fine, great. That's still another way of baptizing the word subjective. The Spirit leads you. Subjective. It's subjective. You read things in context. Like, is this for us or is this for the audience that it was originally written to? All that. I can go on and on and on and on. There may be objective authority in God, and you may be able to point to what objective morality could look like. But practically speaking, the Christian is no closer to objective morality, or at least, again, in a very, very practical sense, acting it out and actually having access to it. They're no closer to it than anyone else in the world. So let's see. Let me check out these others. How would you define morality in debating objectivity, subjectivity of morality? It seems like we never actually define the term morality being modified, and thus the discussion becomes fruitless. I would define morality as a sort of a standard of values. What is right and what is wrong, what is good, what do we call evil, and I probably should work on a much more precise, profound definition of morality. That's a great question, because you're right, we do use language all the time and assume what's inside the suitcase that we're traveling around with. We don't know what's inside the suitcase. So I'll try to unpack that suitcase a little bit and just say, in very basic terms right now, that I say that, what is good and what is bad, what should we deem as bad, what is worthy of judgment, what is worthy of shaming. Even though in this culture we say we don't want to shame anybody, there's a lot of things that we won't shame people for, but there's many things we will shame people for. We shame pedophilia, we shame abuse, we shame lying, we shame gossiping, there's a lot of things we do shame. So what is worthy of shaming, what is worthy of punishment, what is worthy of excommunication from any particular group, that's sort of what I mean by morality, deciding what actions and even way to think, what is wrong. Is racism wrong? We do shame racism. What is wrong? And I think that morality is not objective. I think I've found it very interesting. Two books that I've recently read is Sapiens by I forget how to pronounce his name, Yuval, or I forget his last name. Sapiens and The Atheist, and The Bonobo and the Atheist. And both of those books, it's ironic that I read them back to back, that they both introduced a word to me that I haven't really used much in the discussion of morality. Oftentimes, there's only two words that are used, as if those are only two options. Either morality is objective or morality is subjective. I've never thought of it in terms of morality being a thing being intersubjective. And I believe that for everyone, morality will always be intersubjective. Even for the theist, the person who believes in God, your morality is an intersubjective thing. It is a relationship that you, in some sense, you're not the dictator, but you do play a role. There's a Holy Spirit involved, and there's context of where you are involved, and yeah, morality is intersubjective. But I don't want to get too off topic with this. I think that the point that I'm trying to make, as far as what I'm considering for myself, and what I think Christians and non-Christians in general, I feel like I keep beating this drum for a reason. I keep finding reason to bring this back up, and I'm trying to test the limits of rationalism. And I think we as a culture, we as a society, more and more as we rightfully critique religion and rightfully critique traditional values, still have to find a way in a postmodern relative world who is liberal and progressive, find ways to intelligently and empathetically interact with each other on a global scale. And I think that when we make rationalism this idea, or materialist world, like I think that we could be, maybe I'm projecting my own fears as an individual person. I don't think I am, though. I've seen a lot of atheists understand the problem with if everyone believed that the world was only natural, that that was all that we see is all that we get. And maybe that's why religion is called the opium for the masses, because it keeps the herd under control. I think there's some truth to that, but I don't think it's a truth that we have to scoff at or not consider the benefit of we having some sort of belief outside of rationalism. So I don't know if I'm making a lot of sense right now, because I don't know why this always happens with live stream. I ate, I got on the live stream, I was great, I hydrated, drank some coffee, and for some reason that coffee made me mad hungry, and then my thoughts just got really scrambled. So I feel like I've been rambling this day. All right, so the question always comes back to when it comes to Christianity is, what is this pull towards absolutes? Please explain that. I'm not sure if I understand the question. By the way, Joe, I linked the full YouTube interview somewhere in the comments above if you're interested. Yeah, I'm going to check out the full interview. I'm definitely going to check it out. Isn't the possibility of change and evolution in our thinking about God more comforting and affirming and honest? Yes, absolutely. When I suggest for myself, as I'm considering, when I hear conversations like this from Peterson, and when I think about these things in myself, considering the Bible and all that, religion in general, religious faith in general, it must include this same sort of framework that I must also evolve and leave room for mystery. I don't want to return to any type of faith that I had prior to. And I want to be honest about that. I want to have an honest approach to it. And also being open to the idea that religious people from the past, from biblical times, ancient, not just Bible, but just ancient humans in general, have been speaking about this supernatural realm for so long. And I think they have a lot of true things to say, and yet that doesn't leave them without critique, and that we can't simply stand on there. Much like science. Like, yeah, sure, Newton was a great mind, phenomenal mind, but he was very limited in his compared to what we know now. Like me as an individual, I'm not anywhere near as smart as a Newton. However, in this society, what we know now about science far, far exceeds anything not anything, but far exceeds what Newton knew about science and the natural world. And so it's not to say that we simply toss Newton out and we don't need him anymore because we know so much more than him. No. He said some very truthful things that we can build on, even if some of the things that he said were maybe proven wrong or maybe proven incomplete. Doesn't matter. He's still someone that we can look to understand our history of what we know about science, and also to tell us something about the future, and still be considering how he approached science. So I think that's kind of how I would like to think about the ancients when they speak about God, when they speak about the supernatural, is that I don't want to just simply toss them out. I can still say they were incorrect or incomplete. Those are fair. I think that's the issue that I have maybe with mainstream conservative Christianity, is that there's not really much room to say, hey, they might have got a lot of things wrong, and that's okay. That's perfectly okay. That's not to say that they have nothing to add to the conversation. So, yeah. I'm not really here to get into apologetic conversation, Sunday vibes. I've commented with you before, and I get it. I appreciate it. But as we were saying in this live stream, there are questions that we have that are loaded with presuppositions. And so even the question of, wouldn't you think the science leads more towards a creator? It's a loaded question. And how would I approach this? I'm not going to approach it. Let's just leave it at that. You may find Pints with Aquinas content. Let me say, for context, Pints with Aquinas is a traditional Catholic podcast. I do know that he's Catholic traditional. I'm familiar with Thomas Aquinas. That's why I'm assuming that it's called Aquinas to begin with. That there's some sort of Catholic thread to it that Jordan Peterson's wife was familiar with. She just became Catholic this Easter. Interesting. Did not know that part, and is providing the Catholic world access to her husband. That is also very helpful context. Thank you. Did not know that. You may find Pints with Aquinas content on Thomism, Aristotelian philosophy, and natural law interesting. Yes, I've watched some of his stuff before. I left traditional Catholicism after pursuing a theology degree, but I still find Catholic theology supremely fascinating. That's dope. I find it fascinating too. I find my own branch, my own sort of heritage of Christianity, I still find it very fascinating as well. Ashley said, but you don't deny a creator, right? I'm firmly on I don't know, meaning, and I know that sounds like a cop-out sometimes. Everybody wants you to make a stance. And I think sometimes the more honest answer is I don't know. I don't have the experience currently or knowledge to say so. I've already ruled out that rationalism alone will get me there. But I also know that, as I was saying before, you can make all kinds of rational arguments for or against God, but if God is this ultimate reality that rationalism is included in, then there's no way that I can confidently 100% ever say that there is no God. I can only speak to my own personal experience and my thoughts on it, but I would never be arrogant enough to say there is no God. So I don't actively deny that there is a God. It's not something, and it's not something that's so obviously present in my personal life, but it is something that I'm open to. So, okay, y'all asked me. All right, I'm gonna try to wrap this up because y'all asking some really great questions, and I feel, why do I always get hungry? I got to figure out. That's gonna be part of my live stream from now on. It's just like I won't start a live stream without some fruits and snacks, because my brain just start like, okay, and it's really hard to like engage in real thoughtful ways when you're feeling lightheaded. All right, let's go. Interesting question on your earlier point. How do you weigh, quote unquote, being correct? If everyone was naturalist, what would happen versus making decisions that you find beneficial, leaving Christianity? Let me read that one more time. I think I understood the first half and then you lost me in the second half. So all right, cool. How do you weigh being correct? If everyone was naturalist, what would happen versus making decisions that you find beneficial? Maybe I still don't understand the second part, but I will say this though. I do push back against the idea that if we all stop believing in God, that there would somehow be some massive anarchy and some purge and everyone would start murdering and raping everybody and there's just be this all out. I don't believe that for two reasons. One reason is because people believe in God and still do all those things and justify it by their belief in God. So that, again, that's another one of my points of why I don't believe that objective morality is ever fully accessible to the Christian in any practical sense. You can only point to it. And it's like, well, without objective morality, we would have X, Y, Z. It's like, well, y'all claim to have objective morality and there's still all that stuff happening. And sometimes in the name of God. So if we all believed in God and we all came to the mental ascension, we had mental ascension to the idea that God exists and this particular God exists and this is what the particular God wants us to do, masses of human history have believed all those things and still done heinous things. It doesn't solve the point. It only creates a philosophical problem that you have a philosophical answer to, but it doesn't solve any practical thing. So that's my point. But the next point I would say is this. Reason why I believe that morality is intersubjective, from an evolutionary standpoint, we've evolved to be empathetic. And not just so that we have some sort of status or protection in a group, but we naturally, at large, want to be empathetic. It's just our natural inclination. You can even test or observe how empathetic babies will be based on if they yawn when other people yawn. That is an empathetic response. We are wired to be empathetic, and we're not always perfect in that. When we start getting to the nitty gritty of what it means to be empathetic, it becomes very gray. But our inclination to want to care for others is not some foreign thing that if God no longer is in our framework, then we would somehow want to do everything for selfish gain. It's just a massive assumption about the nature of humans. That's not our basic nature. Again, reading the bonobo and the atheist, I thought it was really interesting that if you look at the bonobo, who is our closest living closest living relative. We did not come from bonobos. They are our closest living relative. And I mentioned this in other live stream, is that they do not fight and murder each other. Even when they run into opposite groups of bonobos, how they solve conflict is through sex, not through violence. Now, there's also the chimpanzee, who is also another close relative of ours, and they solve things a little more differently. But it's not to say that it's outside of the realm of possibilities that we are simply wired without any acknowledgement of a supernatural creator, that we could simply be wired. And this idea works even for the Christian, who says that we're made in the image of God and his law is written on our hearts, that even if you don't acknowledge God, that people can be good people simply because they were created in the image of God, X, Y, Z. So it's like, okay, so what if God exists, and even if we can't find or acknowledge or point to him, he's already made us a certain way, and so we would still act in very moral ways. It would not turn into complete chaos. So again, even if we didn't have direct access to objective morality, doesn't mean that we would not live morally. We've proven that. So I don't get the question, Sunday Vibe. What Bible verse says Christians obtain objective morality? I never said a Bible verse says that. I'm simply responding to what many Christians say about objective morality. Whether or not there's a Bible verse to support it is not my concern. That would be a concern of y'all's. Okay. Believing in a creator doesn't equal Christianity or traditional religion. Doesn't seem the win that many Christians think it is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think they're trying to corral a bunch of different arguments to make Christianity true. It's like, well, it's not just one argument, but it's the power of them collectively that make Christianity a plausible solution or whatever. But it's not any one individual argument, which, cool. But yeah, simply appealing to objective morality doesn't get you to the Christian God. Simply appealing to a creator doesn't get you to the Christian God, X, Y, Z. So anyways, all right, I think that's enough for today. Thanks for engaging, y'all. Try to keep this relatively short compared to my other ones. Just some thoughts that I had watching that video. I'll try to do more of these. Let me know if y'all like that. Y'all vibe with the interacting with philosophical, religious, scientific, relational, romantic, whatever, dating style, whatever, just trying to broaden this. For those of you who are a little confused by the branding right now, obviously I've moved it from the shores to flights and feelings. Those of you who have been following me for a long time know that Flights and Feelings is not a new thing. That's the name of my podcast. And I started the shores as a separate thing of that to simply talk about Christianity alone, or the deconstruction of it. And I've realized that I don't want to be boxed in too much in that way, that it's not the only thing I want to speak about. And Flights and Feelings is just a better name. And I already have a logo for it, and it's already got a brand attached to it. So it's like, why not? So that's the approach with that. But thank y'all so much for engaging, and yeah, all that good stuff. Comment, like, subscribe, and I got to get some outro and intro music too. So the theme music from the podcast, we're going to make that happen. All right, y'all.